or a story where everything is perfect, but the truth is relationships are complicated and messy. But we have a generation that the second anything goes wrong, rather than put in the time to make it work, they go running for the door. And that's across everything, not just marriage. That's in jobs. That's in all sorts of things that
And I
young
looked that
people are
up for
taught to
you.
run away.
I looked that up for you,
Go
and
ahead.
Mia Khalifa is 30 years old.
Mhm.
Just so you
Right.
know, that is our
And
opening,
I
and
wanted to
anybody can
clarify
jump in. Go for it.
that she doesn't have 3 failed marriages. It's only 2, which is still more than most people, I guess. And then the third was an engagement that she called off.
Okay.
And I have a
Fair enough.
feeling that Mia Khalifa probably makes significantly more than the average person. And at this point, she's probably a multimillionaire just from being an influencer. To my understanding, I don't think she was really like compensated that much for the money that she earned when she was an adult star. So my if I had to guess, the reason why she is more likely to like quote unquote jump into these marriages is because if you cohabitate with somebody long enough, the state does not give a fuck that you didn't go down to a courthouse and exchange vows and sign a marriage certificate. They're gonna say that you're common law marriage. So it might be a thing that she does to protect her assets because it is literally just easier for her to sort her finances out that way than to leave it up to the fate of the state saying, well, you guys lived together for 5 years, now everything is basically split down the middle in the event that you guys ever break up. But I don't think it's interesting to evaluate her personal life or her personal marriages. I think the much more interesting thing to look at is the arguments that she made. And for the most part, she was saying, like, verbatim quote, we're not stuck with these people being your partners or whatever. Marriage is not sanctimonious, it's simply paperwork. It's a commitment you make to somebody, but if you feel like you're not getting anything from that commitment, you're trying, you have to go. And she's saying you don't want to be stuck with somebody. So she to me is just emphasizing that like people, women like especially, should not have any fear in leaving their partner if they don't feel like the relationship is working out, and that marriage can be looked at as like what it is, which is a financial institution and a fairly neutral thing, not this sanctimonious religious thing. And I fail to see how. I feel like most people are not really that mad at the arguments. I think they just don't like that it's coming from her. And that she's not ashamed of her divorces. That's it.
You're saying that she's marrying for tax benefits and then it's a
I'm
purely
hypothesizing that
transactional.
it's possible that the reason she does that is to protect her assets because she probably out earns her partners like from that point forward significantly.
But common law marriage doesn't kick in like common law marriage is like a 7-year term.
Right, but I'm
Uh,
assuming if she thought that I'm going to be with this person for life or whatever, she went into that marriage assuming like this is the person for me. We're going to be together for not just 7 years, but till death do us fucking part. 3 years in, that didn't end up happening, but still, like she doesn't want. I'm assuming that the reason behind just like quote unquote rushing into these marriages is one, she views marriage as just a means to an end and a contract at the end of the day. It's not like a religious thing for her, so there's not really like this kind of like
okay.
she doesn't put it up on a pedestal. It's a
But it doesn't
hypothesis. I
it
have no
doesn't
idea.
sure, but it doesn't protect her assets in any way because it wouldn't matter if she was married or unmarried. If she's living in a state that recognizes common law marriage, they're going to come after her assets
I,
regardless of if
I
there's a
think she's
contract or
implying
not.
a prenup, but yeah, could we maybe like back this up because like I don't know anything
Okay.
about like her prenups or like whether I don't want to like mind read Mia Khalifa's like why she's rushing into marriages or not because we don't like have
Do it in my intro.
sure, but I don't want to rush in and be like it's because of like her assets or because of like these other things. So I feel like could we like back up and maybe like figure out like what we think marriage is, what we think like the actual issue at hand like societally is, or I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, gladly.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Chaeiry, are you here?
I am right here.
Okay, can Erudite and I get an intro before we get into the open? Because I feel like
There is no intro.
Oh, okay.
You need to interrupt. Yeah,
Okay,
go
then
for
I'm
it.
gonna interrupt. So my concept, no, I completely disagree with Chaeiry. I viscerally disagree. I think that people are upset, including
Get
me,
her.
about the religious connotations of marriage or the sanctimonious or sanctity of marriage. I think that these are things that we've developed over thousands of years. They're a tradition rooted in a lot of people's belief systems. And the whole point of it is to sacrifice part of yourself for your partner and for that partner to do the same for you so you guys can go until death do us part and also take care of children. Which is wild to me. As a matter of fact, let me just go ahead and ask you a question, Miss Straighteraid. Do you plan on
Yeah.
having children?
Yeah, I do actually, if I can.
Do you plan on sacrificing part of your life for your children and part of your life for your partner?
Yes, I do.
So why
Well, I don't like to
would
use the
shake
term
your hands?
sacrifice, but I would probably use the term compromise, yeah. And like, you know,
What's
there's
wrong with
like
sacrifice?
because that makes it sound like I'm giving up something, but it's like I'm going to consent voluntarily to a partnership with somebody, to kids with somebody, and those are agreements that I'm entering into, not something I'm being asked to give up. They're things I'm like voluntarily like rendering, if that makes sense, you know?
Okay.
One thing,
Yeah.
counterpoints. I think you're using your webcam mic because you sound like trash.
Yeah, I'm fixing it.
And I know you have good mic quality.
Yeah, give me a
Also,
second.
I'm not sure, Straight Right, is there any way you could adjust? I'm just getting a ton of white noise when you speak. If you can't do anything about it, it is what it is. But
Is that his mic quality, or is it just his arguments are trash? But
it's
if you could fix
True.
both.
I sound smooth as silk as always, though, right?
yeah, you sound good. You're great.
Good to hear.
All right, hold up. So how is it now?
He sounds good there, I feel. No? Say a couple things.
Talking. Hello.
Penis,
You're
penis,
Counterpoints
perfect.
is
Yeah,
arguing
you're
with
good,
him.
Aaron. You're good, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're perfect on my end at
Okay,
least.
What about me?
Okay. If you want to use the term sacrifice, I don't look at it that way, but I'm really not going to
Okay.
get caught up in like you can't use this word or that word. If you look at it as what I characterize as sacrifice, go for it. Don't really care. As far as like why I was making the faces is because I don't think that just because something has like thousands of years of precedent or whatever, that means that it is a good institution, that it is something that is worth preserving. I think that is something that should be frequently evaluated and reflected upon, and we should look at whether like these things exist as tenets to serve us, not for us to just carry them into perpetuity simply for the sake of doing so. So I think that marriage is increasingly like first it started off as a financial institution, and at some point there was a religious transformation into that, and a lot of different cultures look at marriage as a different thing, a sanctimonious thing. But kind of started out with like we are using this contract to determine who's going to get the pigs, who's going to get the cows, and whose kids are whose, basically. And I feel like we're kind of returning back to people understanding that it really, at the end of the day, is just a document or whatever, and that the more important thing to focus on, like, that's not to downplay a lifetime partnership or a serious relationship. That's just to say that the contract is like the least important thing about your union. You can have, I think, a very good relationship with somebody and like lifelong partnership without ever signing the contract. And similarly, you can have signed that contract and not have anything that like even close to comes like resembling like what we would say is like a good marriage. Would you agree?
I have two objections to your perspective completely. So I think that through the nature of life, like sacrifice, basically going through hardship in order to achieve something better, is a necessary part of life. And as a result, through being with a partner for extended periods of time, you're going to necessarily have to sacrifice parts of your interests, your personality, your money, your time, your attention, and it is a give and a take. And as a result, it's not a negative thing. I understand we're in like this really materialist, selfish, I'm the main character culture, but this is actually in particular what literally this is what, fucking Vito was saying, was that the second you feel difficulty, oh, I'm not the main character anymore. Oh, I have to sacrifice something that I really like in order to make sure that my partner and my family is correct. Then I feel like you're going to fucking be a pussy and a bitch, and you're going to fucking fold up your cards, and you're going to fucking quit because it's
okay. So
easy to
is this just
easy.
endure?
Huh?
Is this whole argument just the light version of what MLD said on whatever, which is just endure? People need to endure.
Yep. And I haven't gotten liposuction
Wait, hold on.
I haven't gotten liposuction
nope.
yet. Oh.
Okay, I'm good.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure you understand what you're saying yes to. MLD thought that women in abusive relationships need to endure. Are you saying yes to that?
No, of course not.
Okay, then counterpoints, like what to you are the circumstances, if any, under which divorce is permissible?
I mean, I would say like physical abuse, horrific emotional or mental abuse. I would say that like there is something to be said for like irreconcilable differences, but I think that irreconcilable differences should have to do with like you've had a conversation about what you wanted out of life and you realize that you cannot provide that to each other, and as a result this contract doesn't make sense. However, I feel like what is happening in our current culture is everybody is expecting a Hallmark movie romance where you're swept off your feet and you find the person physically attractive and they're charming and they're charismatic and they're rich and you have like great sex and all that kind of stuff. And then you also accidentally want the same things like politics, religion, children, futures, retirement locations, and all that kind of crap. Whereas the truth is that a lot of these relationships require intentionality, thoughtful negotiation, and sometimes thoughtful sacrifice.
I don't think she ever argued that they don't. I think that, again, she made a TikTok, which is not exactly the time where you get into the nuances and the ups and downs of your like last personal relationships or whatever. One and two, I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to or expecting that they're going to have a life with a partner that is filled with like joy and happiness or whatever. I don't think anybody's under the impression that that's going to be easy, but I don't think that makes you hedonistic or immoral or just main character syndrome pilled or whatever you want to call it by being like, yeah, I want to have like a fun and like great sex life and enjoyable time with my partner or whatever. And I want to kind of minimize the hardships and kind of maximize the goodness that we bring into each other's lives.
My counterpoint for that, though, is the fact, and I'll let other people in, but my counterpoint for that, though, is she is not the Tom Brady of marriage or relationships. As a matter of fact, she's basically like the football equivalent of a third string fucking player who went onto the field and got their shit kicked in repeatedly and tried to give 3 shots to, they tried to, put her on the starter fucking bench 3 times and she got her fucking ass kicked every single fucking time. So this is not the person I would take advice from at all. And I don't think anybody should be taking advice from her.
It has no bearing on how valid her arguments aren't. I just knew that people, like I said at the beginning, like people are like
not sanctimonious is fucking stupid. I think it's wildly stupid.
Okay, but like, why even mention that she was a former adult star? Again, like I'm telling you, that's the only reason why this even picked up headlines. Is because it's like I'm not going to be lectured by her on marriage because she doesn't know what the fuck she's doing. But I'm looking at her relationship history, and I'm like, married at 18, divorced at 20. You may as well just throw that marriage out in terms of like if people will hold that against you, because people look at that and they don't see a big failure, they see a dumb kid who got married too soon. So chuck that one. And then the other one was at 25 to 28. Is it that insane to get married at 25 and then get divorced at 28? And then she didn't go through with the third one. She called it off. She was like, okay, we're not ready, or we're not taking this step or whatever. This doesn't sound insane to me for like a modern woman in 2023.
If I could steel man what I think is maybe a more reasonable concern. I think the biggest concern that I would have with like Mia Khalifa, to be honest, when it comes to the marriage stuff, I think it's tricky because I think marriage means different things. Like I have a religious perspective of marriage, but I would never put that on secular people. And I think I definitely know secular people who are married for like some legal contract benefits, but like they don't have marriage in any level of like the religious way that I would have like with my husband, for example. I think the biggest issue that I see with Mia Khalifa is that her approach to like looking at the 3 relationships is to mostly go like, I'm not going to stay with these like shit men, with like pretty minimal introspection of like what you're also saying there though is that like 3 times over, which again, I would agree, like at 18, everyone fucks up. Everyone like picks a bad partner. I think it was like her porn producer too. So like fair enough. She's 18. She made a dumb decision, right? I think the issue is like after 3 relationships, there's like this lack of introspection of like, yeah, just get into a relationship that makes you happy versus being like, well, what is going on in this situation that Mia Khalifa is consistently picking partners that end up with her so dissatisfied that she ends the relationship. I think like that's more like my interest, which obviously I will probably be maybe.
Yeah. And I want to wrestle away the interest real quick. So no, you mentioned like the pigs and the cows and all that kind of stuff earlier in it, that these are material negotiations. That's not like arbitrary. Like we look back on these like medieval peasants because we're like, oh, they needed to get married so they could get 2 pigs. Pigs was survival. Cows was survival. And these are modern negotiations that basically give people evolutionary, biological advantages in order to have kids and have healthy and happy kids. So if you're making a series of choices that are dog shit and then you're vilifying the institution, why the fuck would I take your advice? And then not only that, the sanctity of the relationships, that you don't even have to believe in a personal God in order to believe in some level of sanctity or higher level behavior related to these relationships. The reasons why you get married is because you're doing the contract. The reason why you're doing the contract with your friends and family is because they're celebrating you doing that contract. The reason why everybody celebrates it is because they're hoping that you stay together for the remainder of your lives so you can share like spiritual and material challenges and tribulations and come out ahead, and not only pass on the wealth and happiness and joy that you guys are able to give each other to children. This is why the institution was created, and to act like that is arbitrary is fucking dumb. And if you're going to shit on that, then I'm going to shit on you. It's as simple as that.
I never said it was arbitrary, but
one second, Aaron. So I hear where Connor is coming from, and I wonder if Vito, you're close to him, because I know your concern was I don't know if viewing the issue with her being a sex worker, and I don't know that you're saying that, Connor, but it factors
I am.
into
I'm
it.
being judgmental.
And I know Vito believes that it might be an issue with modern women. So, like, do you see
Yeah.
yourself in his argument?
Well, I think I've known sex workers and I've known people in that industry. They do have a more relaxed view of relationships, I think for obvious reasons, where maybe they don't, treat the act of intimacy as sacred as, say, the average person might, because they're engaging in intimacy, for money, which is fine. And I don't cast shade on that. Again, I have friends in those industries. But I do agree with Connor then that if you're someone who, let's be clear, has this background where, the idea of human intimacy and connection is probably far different from the norm. At least that's been my experience when I've met sex workers. I don't think you're in a great position to give the average person marriage advice, because you have a skewed idea of what a relationship looks like. Not skewed wrong. I can't say you're wrong, but I can say that it doesn't, meet what the average person thinks is important out of a relationship.
What I would like to ask you with that is, if we are looking at how many people participate in sex work or sex work light, which is like OnlyFans and stuff, that maybe there are a lot of people that need advice from a sex worker.
Need advice from a sex worker about marriage?
Because it's not too much of a niche. There are a lot of people who partake in that industry. Do you
I'd
think
say
that
the
they
majority.
don't need
What
to hear
percent
from-
of people do you think are participating in the sex work industry compared to the actual population?
Consistently, it's probably low, but over their lifetime, I wouldn't know the number.
Well, I think the
But
average
it's gotta
person,
be.
I don't know. I know a lot of young women are getting into it. Maybe it will become, the norm to have an OnlyFans. I do think we have a generation that is becoming very sexualized very quickly because of the internet. So who knows? But I think that also, a lot of what I've seen. Oh, sorry, am I breaking up? A lot of what I've seen from, those communities is that they do not really engage in long-term relationships. There's a lot of just, trading love around. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, when Mia Khalifa tells me, I'm going to give you advice on marriage, go out, keep getting married, and cut it off after 3 years if it isn't working. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like good advice at all. That seems to go against everything we know about marriage.
Such an uncharitable. Like, do you think that is the most charitable version of her argument? No, I don't think that's what she was saying at all.
You don't think she said cut it off if it's not working?
She did, but you said after 3 years. And, like, you're making it sound like, again, she's saying, like, after just, like, a short period.
After
like,
1 year.
So what about after 5 years? What about after 10 years? What after about 20? Like the whole reason.
No, I think that's
maybe I could bridge us. Maybe I could bridge us. Because I feel like, I'm not sure you guys would all agree, but most marriages fail. I think it's at like 50%, correct?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So
the scattershot method maybe has some use to it. Maybe you'll find a
hold
good
on,
one
Vito.
along the way.
That's not what I'm saying.
Just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, that 50% number is in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think in most kind of like first world
and
countries,
it goes up for like second marriages and third marriages. For second marriages, it's like 60-something%. For third marriages, it's 76% divorce rate.
It's almost like people. Sorry, go ahead. I got names.
If we know, the institution of marriage, I think, is failing for a number of reasons. Probably in large part because like the moral situations that led to people committing to a marriage long term, as somebody who comes from like a very, very religious background, I know Counterpoints does as well. The reality is like that doesn't, these prescripts of like what lots of religious people learn, which is what a lot of our like past 100 years of marriage is based off of, doesn't apply super well to like a modern secular person. And so I think what would be an interesting conversation is like, I don't think anyone has good marriage advice for the most part. Like Mia Khalifa doesn't have good marriage advice. Holy fuck though. Like you go to a 60-year-old boomer who's been married for 25 years. He's got awful marriage advice. He can tell you how to basically be miserable in your marriage the whole time, but that's not a relationship that I want. Like I don't want my parents' marriage advice. And so like this idea of like who we get marriage advice and all that stuff, I think it's so empty because we're missing like the crux of the actual issue, which is like marriage as an institution is failing us. Our society is not doing well. And the purpose of institutions is to serve society. And so I'd be curious what you guys think. Like, is there any way to like shift marriage so that it holds a bunch of values that I think we would all agree are good for society? Like sanctimony of your partner, like committing
yeah.
and being
I
loyal to your
didn't know I was
partner.
gonna
Well,
attack
Connor,
Erudite
Connor
tonight.
doesn't think that, Erudite. Connor
Yeah.
obviously thinks that we exist to serve this institution as opposed to it existing to serve us and our needs.
Well, let's be
Hold on,
clear.
hold on, hold on.
I don't think that's true about
the
Connor
crux
at
of
all.
the problem.
But I want to be able to
the
articulate it.
crux of
Vito, I want to go after you.
All right, the crux of the problem is women. We understand this.
True.
Nearly
No.
70% of divorces are initiated by the wife.
That's such
Well,
an uninteresting number, though.
That is
No,
not
no.
an uninteresting.
No, it is.
70%?
Are you kidding
That's a
me?
very.
Yeah.
Do you
Okay, but
think
Vito,
that
That's
just
a very
means?
important stat.
Do you think that when a marriage ends, it's just the women's fault? When
I
women
think-
cite reasons for why they end the relationship, what this really tells us is that women are just more likely to take action when unhappy, and men are more willing to like sit in the mud, which you could
Men-
argue. Both
Yeah.
are neutral. Not one is better.
No.
Men not willing to do anything and not taking action and just sitting miserable isn't better or worse than women taking action, maybe
Being
wrongly, and
miserable,
ending their
Natural
relationship.
state of being human. You have to endure periods of misery. Okay, we just went through one of the biggest
Endure,
public
you have
health
to endure.
crises.
Okay, hold on.
Yes,
I'm
you
just
do
gonna
have
stop
to
you. Hold on.
endure, and
Stop.
women
Wait,
will not
wait.
stick it
Please.
out. They will
God, I was
run.
really hoping for a good faith conversation. Can you just summarize?
I am having one.
You're
Go.
not, because I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. Could you just summarize for me what you think I'm trying to get across? Because your response wasn't in response to what I was saying.
Your response is that women are more likely to take action when something isn't working.
And
And my reaction is that
no.
women are
That's
more
not all I said. There's more there.
Okay, then go, give me the second part.
The modern institution
Okay.
is failing us, and we should make it better so it serves modern people better. And also, religious people shouldn't voice their expectations on secular people because it doesn't make sense to them.
That was my previous argument when I was talking to you. Counterpoints, yes.
Okay,
What
just
I'm saying to Vito. No,
summarize it
that's
again.
not what I'm saying to you. Yeah. So what I'm saying to you is all it really shows us is that people are unhappy in their marriage, and when they're unhappy, men are willing to sit in it and be miserable,
Yes.
and women
are
are
strong.
not. No,
Women
that's
are
not what
weak.
this means. Hold on. It is
No.
not strong to just subject yourself and your partner to a awful marriage. As somebody who's come from a long line of people who've stuck it out, my parents have been married for like 28 years. And to be clear, when I look at their marriage, it was the main reason I was terrified of getting married, because I don't want to be stuck in a relationship where like 5 years in, we forget the shadow of what it even felt like to be in love, and we can barely stand being around each other. I don't care if you've endured 25 years, you're miserable, your kids don't want to spend time with you, and your wife fucking hates you and is begging for the day that you die. I don't want that marriage, even if it lasts for a long time. So men enduring is just as neutral as women taking action. Both parties are fucking up. It's a tag team effort.
I
Okay,
disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
Oh,
too.
Connor.
Yeah, please, if I can. So, no, I disagree with you. I understand what you're saying, and you gave me something new, but I want to address the old thing. Okay. So, a lot of, I would say probably in the past 200 years, I think it's like a Victorian thing, we've romanticized the concept of marriage, where we want to be in love, and we want to be young, and Romeo and Juliet, and we want to die in each other's arms, and we want to be the Notebook, and we want him to build a house for us, and it's a 1910 house that he restored for us, and he's
Yes.
Ryan Gosling, and he has abs even though he's an alcoholic, and when we break up, he still pines over us, and all this kind of shit. We have a very like romantic conception of love, but the truth is that I think what Straighter had said earlier was that it was a contract. But the truth is that it's two things at the same time, as always. Like, it's always the same things. It's a partnership in which you're supposed to love the other person and the other person's supposed to love you, and you can have romance, and you can have great sex, and you can have adventures together, and you can travel together. But at the end of the day, it's the partnership as the head of a household, and you should think of yourself as a part of like a corporative body. You are a part of an institution that you have created, an institution of two people who are working to each other's mutual benefit. So when you say, no, it's not about the contract, it's about the love, then you're missing out on creating an institution that both of you can manage. And when you say it's only about the contract, it's not about the love, then you obviously end up with loveless, fucking joyless dickheads who are just tolerating each other until they die, like Erudite just said. So the very clear solution is basically telling people what they're getting into. And when you have secular people who are saying this is not a sanctified relationship, it's just a material contract, you tell them to go fuck themselves. And when you have stupid people like MLD saying that you just have to endure, even if you don't love each other, even if the sex is garbage, even if blah, 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 you just have to endure it for the contract, then you also have to tell that person, suffer through abuse. You have to tell those people to go fuck themselves too. And you have to bring up the positive examples. You're saying that you wouldn't go to old people for marriage advice? I actually have a decent chunk of like pretty happy older people that I look at that I think are good examples.
Hold on. Happy is the key, right?
Who?
When we're talking about marriage success,
Oh.
my issue with when we talk about marriage success and when we talk about these divorce rates is all we use is longevity as a measure of like marital success. That's not necessarily marital success. It's something. It's definitely not something I would fully dismiss. Those are fucking resilient people. But like the purpose of enduring isn't just to like suffer forever. You endure your relationship with the goal that things will get better, that you're going to work on it. So like as somebody, I went through a separation. So like anyone talking about like enduring through a hard part, yes, I believe in that. But the purpose of the separation and the pain that we were willing to put up with was because both of us had the orientation of let's try to see if we can figure this out. What is happening in a lot of modern relationships is this is why the gray revolution of divorce is happening, is there's been a whole bunch of men who've been told that their only value is breadwinning. So they've devoted their entire life to only that. They've never really participated emotionally with their wife as much as she needs. She's miserable and unhappy. And then when the kids leave, the wives leave them eventually. This is so fucking common because the reality is that most people in their marriage, they just stuck together long enough and they were never happy because working on it never came.
Okay, so
Yep.
I want to do a direct response and then I'll let anybody else talk. So you're right that you should not be enduring the relationship. You should be enduring the difficulty that comes from being in the relationship as you logistically navigate your life. And I can use a very specific, you use some personal examples, I'll use some personal examples, okay? When my wife and I got married, we were dead fucking broke. We were selling furniture in order to go buy groceries, and we had to get roommates when we first moved in together, okay? So we've been broke, and we sure as fuck had to endure the shit out of that. And then when it came to law enforcement, it was literally such a stressful job having me work 60-hour weeks in order to do wild shit. I'm coming home and I'm telling her about how, like, I wrestled crackheads and, like, one of them bit me, or, like, a fucking woman ripped out her colostomy bag and threw it at me. Like, just, like, a few of those, like, you know, cool examples, which to me are kind of funny and fucked up. But to her, it's stressful to know that her partner could be killed at any second and that she's going to get a life insurance payout of $100,000 and then she's going to be a fucking single mom. So we had to endure what I needed to fulfill during that like time in my life in order to get what I needed out of law enforcement. Then ultimately I had to sacrifice and endure a different job in order to make her happy and prioritize my family. So what I'm saying is there's a mutual relationship here. We're not perfect. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we are willing to sacrifice things. And what I think Vito and I see and hear when I see a 30-year-old, 2.5 times divorced, pornographic actress who says the second that things are tough and that it's no longer working for you, you need to hit the eject button. We see a coward, and we see a coward encouraging other people to be cowards.
Connor, how are you not the main character? Because
I
what you
am
just
the main
described,
character.
what you just described,
NPCs.
there's two things that I disagree with you on. You are simultaneously holding in your head that, you know, a lot of people nowadays, I over-idealize marriage as this beautiful, like, Hallmark type love affair, when what Mia Khalifa is describing is, like, the furthest thing from, like, a fucking fairy tale, because she's literally saying, fuck the white dress, fuck the chastity, fuck the institution.
No.
Literally, it's just paperwork. So I don't see her over-idealizing it as, like, a Hallmark thing, or, like, a lovey-dovey thing. Maybe that's, like, another group of people, but certainly not who she's talking to me, or her, one. And two, I said you're the main character because you described your, like, the beginning of your marriage as something that was rife with financial precarity. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you think you were ready for marriage despite that challenge? Or do you think that your marriage, like, succeeded in spite of that? Or do you think that helped?
I was ready, and my wife was ready, because we both knew what we were signing up for, and neither one of us were pussies.
I don't think it's as simple as that for most people. Like, I think the reason why Mia Khalifa has, like, basically the rose-tinted glasses off is because what you described in your marriage is like, again, simultaneous financial arrangement and reality that the two of you guys are surviving, like, together as an institution, as a couple, and working together towards a greater goal, and you have the love there, but you don't actually have the material basis, and that's actually that's, like, not a really good basis or, like, a stable basis for a marriage at all. I would say that, like, financial problems only exacerbate marriage issues, and that if you have significant financial setbacks, you probably shouldn't be getting into a marriage in the first place. One. So, you know, she doesn't have to worry about that. So she has all the money. She doesn't depend on another man for money, I assume. So she knows pretty clearly, like, when she's happy, when she's not. And that's why she was able to, like, exit that second relationship after 3 years.
Okay.
Because, like, unlike you, she didn't have to worry about that.
You said something wildly important, and I don't think you realize how wildly important it is. You said that there's no denying that finances are a huge stress factor as a part of relationships, okay? There's no denying that, and it is better to enter into a marriage when you are financially stable than when you're not financially stable, because if you're both grinding it out, it's going to cause stress in the relationship. This is undeniable. However, we now live in a society in which, I don't know about y'all, but I feel like as a working class / middle class person, everybody has their fucking hand in my pocket, and I am paid just under what is required in order to fucking survive. That's what it feels like for a working class, middle class person. So if I had to wait to be financially stable in order to get married, I wouldn't be married. And if I waited to be financially stable in order to have kids, I wouldn't have kids. And so what I would say, well, I enjoy having kids and I like being married. And the reason why we've stuck it out is because neither one of us are fucking pussies. So what I would say is that basically I would so much rather be a broke person with somebody who's down for me, who's willing to go through the fucking trials and tribulations, than to say, I'm going to fucking take life on easy mode and I'm going to find somebody who can stick with me during the easy parts of life. Like, the whole reason why the vows are important is because it's in sickness and health, until death do us part, in good times and bad. These are important words, and people just fucking say them, wear a white dress, have a party with their friends, then they get bored, they fall out of love, or they experience a little bit of stress, and they're like, well, fuck this. I was more happy when I was getting finger banged in the back of a 1992 Camry LE, so I'm just gonna go date and fucking fuck around. And then they do that until their 40s, and they still wonder why they're miserable. It's fucking obnoxious when marriage and kids, if you want marriage and kids, is some of the deepest and best parts of life.
I agree. So I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think it's really cringe that people don't get married when they're poor. In fact, like my biggest thing that, like, my husband, who grew up in a homeless shelter, had to, like, shake out of my middle class ass is being like, I was raised on minimum wage in a homeless shelter. And I'm like, and I had a perfectly happy childhood, right? So, like, it was really brain breaking for me of being like, okay, like, this idea of, like, we should probably wait for this or this, like, making, like, major decisions just on, like, finances alone is probably, like, I would argue, the worst reason to get into a relationship in general. And to be clear, most people are pretty unintentional about their relationships, right? But the issue that we're still talking about here is essentially, like, what does the marriage institution mean to the people that it's serving? And the reality is that you have an increasingly secular populace, and the marriage institution, when you're talking about, like, life and death to be part, there, as somebody who is religious, I think that that's based. It's also something that I can obviously connect back to, like, my divine and be like, this is why it's so important. And I'm not saying that secular people can't have morals and stuff, but the imperative now is on society to find secular ways to, like, transpose utilitarian principles into the people so that they, like, value these reasons for different things. Because the reality is, like, these things are empty for a reason. It's because they're backed by religious, like, dogma, and people don't believe in this anymore, which is why, like, no wonder we're raising a bunch of kids that, like, don't really have an orientation. Like, this is, like, the biggest thing that's talked about with the loss of religion, is that there isn't, like, a unifying morality. And I'm not saying, like, religion good, non-religion bad. I'm saying society has to solve this problem. Like, this is just, and so, like, blaming, like, women or men is just, like, so, or saying people are just pussies, I feel is, like, so empty. It's such an uninteresting way to evaluate.
Really quick, as a secular person, I just want to confirm I don't have any morals. True. Continue. Okay.
So I have a bone to pick with you, Erudite. So I'm not, we've talked about faith before, and you know I'm not a literalist. Like, I'm not a literalist. But I look at the moral prescriptions that are within religion, and I don't think that God's gonna, like, do a magic potion and fucking shrink my dick if I fucking do the wrong thing. But
You don't know that.
you're
I
right.
can text him right now. I'm going to ask him, okay?
You know what? You're right, because if
Dick
you do
bees, they're coming.
Yeah, dick bee. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
I helped an old lady across the street, and he gave me a 12-incher, so
nice.
it's just
All right.
a little something.
So, but the
That's
point
the
being
wrong God. That's a different
is
God you're
you
talking
can
about. That's
make-
Allah, not
you can
Christ.
make
Allah help.
secular. You can make secular arguments for religious tradition by appealing to evolutionary psychology. I understand that it's like pseudoscience and lefties don't like it and progressives don't like it. But at the same time, you can say, listen, you don't have to literally believe in Jesus Christ or literally believe in a creator God. You don't have to literally believe that, Noah saved like 2 gay lions and fucking Pomeranians and shit in the fucking ark with like 10,000 different species in a giant fucking wooden boat. You don't have to believe that literally in order to understand that in general you should tell the truth. In general, you should honor your parents. In general, that you shouldn't covet your neighbor's wife. In general, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And as a result, if you follow these moral prescriptions that are rooted in religion, you're going to have a better life than if you don't. And not only that, same thing with marriage. If you find somebody that you love, that you have good chemistry with, that you can have good sex with, who wants to raise children, who wants to be committed to you, and who wants to share material and spiritual deprivations through a lifetime of commitment, then that is somebody worthy of integrating into your life. And when it gets difficult, you should stick with that person, and you shouldn't be a fucking pussy about it. So I'm not just saying be a pussy. I'm saying take the best parts of the religious conception of these ideas and then give it to fucking secular people, because it's very clear that they're fucking degenerates. They're lost. Liberalism tolerates shitty, horrific behavior. And then it goes, oh, I have parents who have been married for 50 years and they're relatively happy and they're drug free and they have a retirement. And your
Sure.
parents are dead from a
But
heroin
you're not-
overdose.
wait, hold on.
Your parents are dead from a heroin overdose. And
You're not
but
you're
we
not
don't know who's
addressing
better.
you're
I'm
not
going to-
addressing the
listen,
second
I'm going
half
to
of my
pass it.
issue.
I'm going to pass it to Kyla. I just want to say, please do not come at degenerates. I am a degenerate. If your husband comes in my DMs, I'm gonna never mind. Not my
You're
fault.
gonna
Literally.
But
say
Kyla,
hi.
your
Same.
response.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. The issue is that this would be the biggest criticism I have, for example, of as somebody who's religious and is surrounded by religious relationships, is that you're missing 50% of the equation to a happy, healthy, functional relationship. Yeah, religious relationships do last a really long time. And I can tell you, not all of them, some of them are excellent. If the man and woman both have the just the perfectly right orientation, where the guy is deeply in love with his wife and always puts her first, then it always works out. But the issue is that if you don't have this perfect situation, you're setting yourself up for oftentimes a really miserable relationship, and a relationship that endures and it sticks it through. But the reality is when I look at my parents, I'm God, I don't know what they're going to decide with their relationship, but if they get divorced or not, I don't care. And to be honest, they'd probably be happier if they weren't together anymore.
I think women are ungrateful. That's really what it comes down to.
Bro.
Is that the best part of a long-term relationship is that there's certain social contracts. If I need someone to pick me up at the airport, that's the job of the person I'm in the relationship with. If I need to make sure our bank account, has enough money in it to feed both of us, it's a two-way street, and hopefully both people are doing their fair share.
Okay, I think
But at
men
the
are
end of the
retarded.
day,
Hold on,
we
I think
have-
men are
Okay,
retarded
whoa,
because
the
they're
ladies
killing
are mad.
themselves. That
Can
men
I
are
just- can I
retarded because
finish?
they're killing themselves all the time. They're miserable and
You're
they're
killing
willing to.
themselves by working. You gotta
Yeah,
work.
by
honey.
working,
I'm
they're-
sorry, you have to work.
Yeah, thank you. I realize you need to work. What I'm saying
Okay,
is that
so the guys
men,
are out there. They're
men are
working, they're
miserable.
bringing-
Men are
yeah,
miserable.
well, life is a misery thing. Okay,
It doesn't
Working-
have to be.
So
It doesn't
sad.
have to
It
be. Are you
is.
kidding me? No.
That's so
No.
pathetic.
The only
have-
thing,
Only
the
for you.
only thing,
Only
the
for you.
only
Working
thing
sucks.
that matters.
Working sucks.
Okay,
You have
seriously,
to work though.
As the religious person, you're all fucking stealing my valor right now. The only reason why these precipices matter, the only reason why you choose loyalty and you stick it through and you love your partner is because life is hard. And sometimes the best that you get is you
Life
wake up
is hard,
and your partner's
yes.
and your partner's
So
beside
life
you
is
and
mostly
you get
suffering.
can
and
I finish?
Occasionally, but you're agreeing with me.
I don't
Okay,
think life
no,
is mostly
I'm not
suffering.
agreeing
I
with
think
you.
Just, Vito,
You
if
absolutely
someone
are.
was
No.
your wife, yeah, that would be mostly suffering. if
What
they
I'm
were your wife,
saying
Vito.
is that the advice to people of life is misery. So just find a partner, stick it out, and hate each other and be miserable together. That's based is soul draining, like actual suicide fodder. No, the reason
Life is
why
suicide fodder.
no, the reason why these religious principles that you guys apparently love so much and want to steal mattered is because in the midst of suffering, all that gave them hope and joy was Christ and community. That's all they had when they were being terrorized by the Romans, when they're being fucked over by like Mother Nature, is because sometimes all you have is that moment of joy of like holding the hand of a person that you love and like getting to watch a sunset. Sometimes
Okay,
that's all
alright,
life
go ahead.
is, and you're advocating for a life that doesn't, like a marriage that doesn't include this recipe. That's terrible.
No, I'm
Okay,
saying
so-
you'll find that if you stick it out.
Okay,
Not
I mean, Vito,
let's hear-
Vito
let's hear
literally just
from
admitted
Connor
that
for
his
1
solution.
second, 'cause Connor's been smiling, grinning, so happy to find someone else who
It's
believes that life is
great.
miserable. So
No,
go ahead,
it's
Connor.
great. And like, yeah, so I agree with both of your hyperbolic positions. Women are ungrateful. Men are retarded and enjoy wallowing in suffering. These are
Hold up,
both
that's not
true
my
thi-
position.
Yeah, I know.
I
it
was-
is. No, I'm just
No,
go
it's
with
literally
it.
not.
It's fine. It's fine. Just go with it. So I think both of these things are true. But I think that it's on us as the men and the women to recognize that women being ungrateful for the amount of effort that their partners put in order to make sure that they're materially comfortable, they're taken care of, the bills are paid, the house is taken care of, they don't have to worry about whether or not the kids can afford to go to school or college or whatever. That is a sacrifice that a lot of men are willing to give, and it would be nice if they recognize that sacrifice. However, as men, we should also realize that it is not our duty in life exclusively to suffer, and that if you're working 60-hour weeks, you're miserable, you want to kill yourself, you're going to bed every single night with your bones aching, you don't even have the time or energy or love to pay attention to your wife or to your children, then you are being fucked in life, which, by the way, is the natural state of circumstances, absolutely, but you need to be trying to negotiate a better reality in which you can still work, provide for your family, and still be a loving and caring husband and a loving
Okay.
and caring
And
father.
I want to get Aaron back in.
Okay, I just want to say to Vito that you are a slutty little pig rolling in the mud, even more than Mia Khalifa ever
Nice.
did, because you
Nice.
literally think what you literally just said earlier is that you should get a wife instead of calling an Uber. What does your wife exist to do for you?
Your wife exists to pick you up from the airport, and I exist to
Yeah,
pick
fuck
her
that.
up from the airport.
Bro!
A relationship, it's a
Gotcha.
social contract that we literally take care of each other. Okay, if you're dying and you need someone to take you to the hospital, that's my job. If our kid is sick, it's my job to make sure he's got a bucket of chicken soup and that, you know, his guts aren't falling
I
out.
think the divorce
It's a
stats that we were
social
talking about
contract
earlier
to
go
make
against what you're
sure-
saying.
You're saying,
Why do you think
you're
women are
literally
understanding
hold
what
on.
divorce is?
You literally just said, well, I could just get an Uber. Okay, well then you don't want someone to take care of you. You're fully self-sufficient. You don't want someone to provide for you. You're an independent woman. But most people want someone in their life who's going to do things for them and take care of them, and that is more important than this constant fairy tale romance, great sex all the time, everybody's always smiling. No, I want someone who, if I'm dying of fucking cancer, they're there to hold my hand in the chemotherapy ward. That is way more important
Why
to me
wouldn't
than
you
whether
want
or not
a partner who's like self-sufficient and you guys just support each other when necessary and when you need to, instead of it being this like you take care of me, I take care of you? It's like, how about we just both take care of
anybody can
ourselves
be
and then we just
self-sufficient.
focus on loving each
I'm
other.
entering into the contract to try and lessen some of the burden on myself and you. We're working together to try and make a world in which we have to expend less energy just to survive. Okay,
You're not-
and it's
you're
not
not
about at the end
roommates
of the
with
day,
benefits.
did he smile at me enough? Did he hold my hand enough fucking times? No, it's did he bring home food? Did he keep
It's
us
not mutually
alive?
exclusive.
Did he put our kids
no,
through
we're
It's
so
not
school?
mutually
close.
exclusive.
No, this
Okay.
is it. Like, you guys are like, I'm with you for a lot of this, right? Like, I think my
Sure.
wedding band with Nick literally says like in the mud together. Like, our thing is always like, we want to find somebody who can like be in the mud and shit together, right? I think that there's deep value. I agree with a lot of
Khalifa
you
will
saying.
never do that.
I do exist to pick my husband up from the airport, and he does exist to pick me up. I agree with
Yes,
you on that.
yes.
But there is another piece to this, which is that a woman should maybe be more grateful for the hard work, for the fact, here's what women really need to recognize, is that young men have been socialized their entire lives to never expect compliments, to never expect grace, and to never expect compassion. And they get hardened by it. And what women want in a relationship is a guy who can be somebody reliable, but also cares about how she feels, because that is one of the most important things. So this idea of like, well, all that matters is he's bringing home the bag. I'm sorry, with welfare in 2023, the reality is like, that's actually not that important. The reality is like, we're all going to be miserably, barely,
Maybe
like
in
just
Canada.
poor together.
But just across in the U.S., I'm telling you, we don't have the social safety net that you think that we do. I wish, though. That would be based.
Hold up.
You have
So you
much
know,
more of a
like,
social
we-
safety net than pretty much anywhere, but I don't want to get into that right now.
10-minute
It's like such an
No,
aside.
in developed countries, are you joking?
I don't want to
That
do
the
this.
whole-
I don't want to do this with
mean,
you, Aaron. I'm not doing
brought
this
it
with you,
up. You
Aaron.
fucking brought it up. Then it's
I
not
brought it
true.
up.
The vast majority of people live on the precipice of
shit.
economic precarity and are $400
Aaron,
away from emergency.
Is this conversation about welfare within Canada and the United States?
One, you brought it up. Two, it's completely
Is this
relevant when we're
conversation-
talking
is this
about the
conversation about
institution of
it? Is
marriage,
this-
which is a financial institution, love. I'm telling you, it is fucking relevant.
Yeah.
Is this
All right.
conversation about welfare states?
It is if women are marrying the fucking state instead of their men.
It's a conversation we can't have without discussing economic realities, Kyla. Promise.
Connor agrees with you for a whole different reason than you think that he agrees with you, just to be clear. No, this is not a
Yeah,
conversation
not
about
here in
this.
We
our-
are going
I would prefer
for 10 more minutes
to
and then we'll
continue-
do closing statements for each of you. Go ahead, Kyla.
Okay.
I would prefer to go back on the actual train of talking about like relationships, which is like, yes, men just bringing home money is insufficient in 2023. Women are working, women are cleaning, women are taking care of the kids just as much. A man just bringing home money isn't enough for these relationships to be like the actual tit for tat that they need. Men also need to work on like basically undoing some socialization and like soften up. And women need to have more grace of being like, yeah, men kind of have to like learn a bunch of these social scripts because nobody taught them because they told them to like fuck off with their feelings. Like both of these things have to occur at the same time. Yes.
No, you're okay. You're totally correct. And what I would say is this is a very different. There's a lot of different conceptions of masculinity throughout history. And basically, when it comes to like Anglo-Germanic, tribe, European shit, a lot of them were like hyper stoic, endure the suffering, all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you're gonna live in a fucking like a hut made out of fucking bear fur and shit, you gotta be a tough bastard. But the point is that there is so much more to life than I experienced since probably like 15. I experienced two emotions: anger and numbness. Those were the total amount of my emotional diversity. And what I realized probably a decade later is that I had been trained either to not feel, I mean, like also like lust and excitement, but still like excitement, lust, anger, and numbness. And the reason why is because I realized that whenever I experience frustration, anger, anxiety, anger, good feelings, numbness. Like, and the reason why is because the world's fucking brutal. Women are fucking cruel. Men are fucking cruel. Social situations are fucking cruel. The economic situation is fucking cruel. And being numb to it can make you a better survivor. But that does not mean that the world is trying to attack you at all of the time. And there are times where you can breathe and enjoy and love the people that you're around. And it's very hard. And you're gonna feel like a gay person when you say an emotion besides anger or numbness. But it's okay to love your children. It's okay to love your wife. It's okay to say that you find her attractive and she's beautiful and all that kind of stuff. It's okay to tell your son that you love them and you want to take care of them. And you're going to feel like a homo the first couple of times that you say it, but after that, it'll break open and you can gain access to emotions besides anger.
Does sound pretty gay. But
Fellas, is
It's
it
so
gay to
gay.
tell your son that you
It's
love them?
so gay.
Yes.
Like, telling my son is very gay.
Every
but I
time
do it
Tom Brady
anyways.
kisses his kid,
On the
Ooh.
lips
He
directly.
calls him the F
Something's wrong.
slur.
something's wrong.
If it's gay, then every man needs to be a little bit more gay based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I want to be really clear about is I think, Connor, you and I think actually mostly disagree. I think the only reason that we're like disagreeing is because of aesthetic. That's my guess. I think you and I, if we were talking one-on-one,
I
we'd
think
be
you're
like,
giving
oh, yeah,
libs
of
the
course,
pass too
of
much.
course. Sorry?
I think you're giving lips the pass too much. I think you do need to take your moral prescriptions and you need to project it onto them and you need to enforce them up to your moral standard. You just need to figure out what moral arguments actually work instead of being like, oh yeah, if you
Nah.
get herpes and do heroin, that's totally cool. Jesus said love you anyways, even though you're a piece of shit. Like I
didn't
vibe
say
with
it's
that.
totally cool, but I said like life's a journey and you get to figure it out. And the idea that like I'm going to give my personal predilections and prescriptions to other people is just tyranny of my opinion. And I don't like that. I
Do
don't
you
like
have
societies
herpes
that
or
work
a
that
heroin
way.
addiction?
No.
Then I think you're doing like above average. I think you're doing better than the average liberal or progressive.
Okay. Going back to what I actually want to say, I think we have to be super careful. One of my biggest frustrations with like the Protestant approach to marriage, for example, is this like weird abomination death cult mantra where basically it's like suffer indefinitely and like suffering is good. It's like truly the Nietzsche slave mentality. Like as long as I'm suffering, I'm noble. This is absolutely Protestantism. And this is absolutely infused into the way that we approach marriages. And I think like the liberals going, yeah, not sure I want to buy into that shit. Makes sense. Does that mean that the liberal answer is better? No, their shit's just as deranged, but they're having to invent an entire fucking new wheel. What I would prefer to do is kind of what you're saying with Connor, is take what kind of works, shift it a little bit, and then apply it to people so that we have like a better opportunity. And just to be clear, the death cult mantra of like just slamming your head into a brick wall until hopefully it falls is the worst thing ever, when it would be so much more noble to actually pause and try to pursue a better tomorrow in whatever way that looks like. But most people don't do that. They just slam their fucking head against the wall and then everyone goes, base, 25 years, amazing. And it's
Go
fucking
ahead, Vito,
awful.
just cut her off.
I would just really love, okay, I agree. If you're in a suffering situation, there's irreconcilable differences. There's no way to make it work. You've been through therapy and counseling and it's just not working. Cut it off. You are a logical human being. You can make your decisions. Mia Khalifa got engaged and after a year cut it off. How much suffering did she possibly endure in that year? Did she really bear a cross for that 1 year engagement? Or is this a woman who was unwilling to endure even the smallest inconsistencies in a relationship?
There's billions of people in the world. Why would you get married to somebody that you already know, you can already see it not working out? And I don't think that's a matter of like personal failure.
Why did she get engaged to him? She got
Because
engaged to him. What changed?
No, the things can change.
What changed? And the point of this whole thing was: should people be taking advice from Mia Khalifa?
No. Hold on. That's so easy. Of course not. Are you fucking kidding me? Of course not. Right?
Okay.
If somebody
Why?
has
Of course
had,
not. Well, then,
Because
we win.
I will explain the actual reasons why. It's not because she's
Okay.
a sex worker. It's not because of all these things. It's because after 3 failed relationships, her only introspection is to say, men suck and get out of the bad relationships, rather than going, what is leading to me regularly selecting partners that I'm deeply unhappy with, that I want to like run away from within 2 years. That is the biggest issue. This is why Mia Khalifa has terrible advice, because if your relationships fail every single time, the pattern is you. It doesn't mean that she's necessarily an awful partner. We have no idea, but we know from what she was saying that there is a lack of introspection. And yeah, in general,
it's a 60-second TikTok. You don't have time to give it your like thought processes of like the nuances of how you selected a partner. I think the point of that was just to say, don't be afraid to like, you know, I want to get rid of the stigma behind divorce. Don't see this as like a failure or whatever. Like if you got divorced, who gives a fuck? Tons of people fucking get divorced.
She's the Tom Brady of marriage. That means she's the best at it ever.
Which she's
okay.
Awful. Hold on. I want to go back.
I took that as a meme.
I want to go back. 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 So, again, Erudite, I take issue with what you said, because no, they're not reinventing the wheel. All of this fucking hedonism, nihilism, fucking bullshit, all it is neo-paganism. It's pursuit, like, they might not literally believe in the Greek and Roman fucking gods, but pretty much everything they fucking do would be perfectly in line with Greco-Roman society pre-Christianity. And I would so much rather deal with the negative consequences of the Judeo-Christian death cult than basically regressing as a society into the Greco-Roman degenerate, disease-filled, fatherless fucking shithole that was pre-Christian and pre-fucking Abrahamic society. So no, I reject that. I also think that you need to have some assertive moral balls and say that the Abrahamic death cult is better than the pagan society, but at the same time...
Why don't you just not do either? Why don't we just not do either?
Because you have to teach people how to do neither, and it's not a passive process. You have to say, this is the part of the pagan society that is correct. This is the part of the Abrahamic death cult that is correct. And you have to follow aspects of the Abrahamic death cult. Well, I'm saying you have to follow... Okay, are you telling people that, like, they have to follow aspects of the Abrahamic death cult? Or are you saying, like, I'm religious, it works for me, but I don't know about you, sis. You do your neo-pagan nihilistic
Have you ever
bullshit.
watched any of my relationship advice? Because if you did, you would know that the advice that I'm giving people is never death cult. It's never suffering good to just grin and bear. It's saying when you're in pain, when your relationship sucks, that's a flag. You need to figure it out, and you're a team to figure it out together. Because there has to be nuance in between. There has to be.
Okay, so let's make a differentiation. So, Chaeiry, do you believe that the word sacrifice is negative? Does it have
Yeah.
negative connotations?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think it can be righteous, but overall, it's pretty. I view it as, I think, negative. Yeah.
okay, so erudite. If I was thinking with my centrist brain and I was projecting myself into the liberal and progressive fucking perspective, when you say that suffering is not the point of relationships or suffering is not inherently good, then what I hear is I should avoid suffering. Whereas when I'm thinking with my
That's your
hold on.
That's your failed thinking.
Let him finish.
No,
Just to be
that's
clear.
that's liberals and progressives failed thinking, not my failed thinking.
No, I agree with
when
you
I
on
think-
this. I will be a
Yeah.
fucking tyrant. I believe the things that I believe because they're correct, and I don't and I'll offer them to people as like alternatives because the alternative to just making prescriptions or whatever is a shit ton of polemics and criticisms, but you're not giving anybody any sort of roadmap or instruction to what they ought to do. You're just railing a bunch of shit, and I think it's pointless to do that if you're not going to give people like, don't do this, you should do this. I think I'm just not dogmatic about it, and I'm open to having my mind change. And so when I say people should not be fucking doing that, I accept that like in 2 years I might be being like, yeah, it was fucking stupid or whatever. People should be doing that. So I'll change those.
So hold on, I
values.
wanna
Yeah.
offer a roadmap.
I'm gonna give you a closing statement, and I'm gonna welcome you guys to continue after those. Okay. So thank you guys for joining. Again, this is one topic for 1 hour. No opening statements, but you will all get your last final closing statement and be able to shout yourself out the way you want. I do have everyone's Twitter handle next to their name on their camera, and I'm gonna start with Connor.
Yes. So the point that I was going to finish with, and then I'll try to do a closing briefly, is that when I think with my conservative centrist part of my brain, suffering correlates with sacrifice. Sacrifice means suffering to achieve something greater. And so I think that it's perfectly fine to ask liberals and progressives and nihilist hedonist degenerates that sacrifice is good, actually, and the Protestants are right about some of the things, and you should suffer if you're suffering for something better than what you're sacrificing for. It's always a negotiated relationship. Most relationships are transactional. To summarize this, I would do the reverse Kramer, but the reverse Khalifa, okay? Do not take Mia Khalifa's advice. If she says something, do the opposite of it, and you will turn out a better person. My name's Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. Check it out. Blah, 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 blah. Next person.
Whatever links you want, add them to the chat. Kyla.
Okay. Sacrifice by itself is just vanity. You're no better than a self-flagellating priest walking around and beating himself in the back with like a club of knots. It's empty. Sacrifice is negative. However, oftentimes you do it to achieve better things. In the case of even Judeo-Christian roots of sacrifice, you slaughter the sheep so that God will bless you. You don't slaughter the sheep because it's ontologically good to do so. You do a painful thing, a difficult thing for the goal of this later thing. And I think it's really important that when we look at like the case of marriage, that we don't nobilize the suffering in and of itself, right? I agree that everyone should learn how to be a little bit tougher and like go through hard times. The issue is that vanity and just sacrifice by itself, running your head against a brick wall, is just going to leave you dead. That's not useful. And I really don't want to give people this advice. But yeah, I also don't want Mia Khalifa's advice. I don't think her advice is necessarily good either. It's hard to know, as Aaron said, there's a lot of nuance that's missing in there. And I'd have to ask her like what specifically she thinks about like when and why you decide to leave.
Okay.
Awesome.
Oh,
Thank
is it
you.
me?
Go ahead, Vito. Yes.
Ladies, you got to toughen up. Life is hard. I know that you've been watching a lot of these Disney movies. The Notebook, excellent example. These fairy tale storybook romances where a man sweeps you off his feet. He adheres to your every need. He's there at your beck and call. Unfortunately, life gets hard. People go through periods of strife and depression, and you got to be willing to stick it out. Mia Khalifa is a typical modern woman. She is weak. She is unwilling to try. She is the main character of her own story, and that's why she flippantly enters into these relationships with no thought or care as to whether she will actually be willing to put in the effort to make them work. Do not be like Mia Khalifa. Stick it out. If you're looking for marriage advice, you'd be better off finding someone who's been married for 20 years who can tell you about how there were dark periods, how there were times they didn't know if they could make it work, as if it seemed like all hope was lost, but because of the strength and resilience of the human spirit, they pushed through, they reconnected, they found love again, and that's what a marriage is. You got to be willing to put in the work, and frankly, the modern individual, men and women alike, this is not just women, men are responsible for this as well. But the modern individual, this new generation, is wants a quick fix, wants an easy answer, and is not willing to put in the work. Resiliency is something to be proud of. Toughing it out is a virtue. God bless America, and subscribe to The Biggest Problem in the Universe on YouTube.
Awesome. And Aaron.
I just want to say to Connor, newsflash, we already have the Judeo-Christian society that you're talking about. It was never formalized into law, but obviously the vast majority of the people who constructed the government were themselves Christians. They just didn't put that we have to observe and be a Christian nation. But yes, it is based on Judeo-Christian values, and guess what that has amounted to? 50% of marriages end in fucking divorce. I don't blame people for wanting to look to a different solution, a different set of values altogether, and we are rejecting Christianity, we are rejecting Judaism, we're even, fucking rejecting Islam here, I think so. And looking for something different, looking for something that might be unorthodox, that will bring them more happiness in the current state of affairs. And I think that's a positive thing. I came here mostly to defend women's rights, but also their wrongs, which means you should get divorced if you think that your marriage is not working out for any fucking reason. And I don't think that that's a decision that people even fucking make lightly. Okay, it's a fucking divorce at the end of the day. But I do think that we should, decrease the stigma. I don't think she really said anything insane. I think she is just a polarizing person, and people's brains fucking broke when at the fucking idea of taking advice from a fucking former adult star, even though she is, by most metrics, objectively successful. So I think people should not focus on whether or not, her marriage has succeeded, or she's a porn star, or fucking whatever the fuck she's doing. The arguments themselves, which is that don't stay in a relationship that you don't feel is working for you, and don't be afraid to end that relationship or get divorced, is sound advice that I don't even think most people fucking object to in the modern world. My name is Aaron, aka Straighterade. I'm at Straighterade on everything, or at Straighterade_, and it was lovely talking to you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you so much. I asked everyone here
Thanks for having me.
panel from the start, and everybody showed up. I couldn't be happier for my first episode. I am now going to offer for you guys to stay and keep going. I'm not going to moderate, okay? Whatever I did, that's as much as I was going to do. But if you start saying slurs, or if you think you have the N-word pass, I will cut in, okay?
I probably do need to dip in the next 10 or so, but I want to point something out real quick. Erudite, you used suffering and sacrifice interchangeably in your response to me. And the, suffering, I would say, doesn't denote any kind of positive result, whereas sacrifice absolutely does. Like sacrifice, the whole reason why you sacrifice something is an offering to God, is to win God's favor. The whole reason why you sacrifice something for your family is because you're trying to give up a part of yourself in order to achieve a higher end. So when you say you can't go to these fucking Zoomers and tell them that they need to sacrifice, it's no, you need to go to them and you need to tell them that they need to sacrifice, but you need to tell them that sacrifice is good if you're working towards a higher end.
Can a sacrifice be in vain?
Of course. Yeah, 100%. Okay. And knowing what sacrifices to make and what is likely to result from those sacrifices is absolutely a huge part of growing up.
Right. So because sacrifices can be in vain, because they can be empty, that's why I'm equating it with suffering for the purpose of this discussion in itself. Obviously, sacrifice is going to be a big, broad one. We can have its own conversation just about it. But if you make sacrifice in vain, it's meaningless suffering. That's what it is. And in the case of marriages, where you constantly sacrifice your happiness and you butt your heads against the wall and nothing improves because you keep trying the same thing over and over, you're just causing meaningless suffering in your relationship. You're causing meaningless suffering for your children as well, right? And so you have to make intelligent sacrifices. I agree with you. And I think the issue with the Protestant death cult is that like most things, Protestants are bastardizing what the principle of these books and stories even were in the first place, right? Which they teach very much, I'm sure you'd agree, in Protestant circles, and that's what most of our marriage idea is that you just stick it out. You just keep staying there. And I think that is a recipe for creating meaningless suffering. I'm not saying that people shouldn't stick out hard times. What I'm saying is that just sticking it out isn't a virtue. All you're doing is causing meaningless suffering, and that is a bad thing in itself. That's vanity, and that's wrong.
Yeah,
Okay.
Connor, do you even disagree with that? I feel like it's such a fucking milquetoast take. I mean, she's just saying you don't get a fucking gold medal or cookie at the end of your fucking sad, sexless 30-year marriage. All you do is get to say, I've been married for 30 years, and that's that only means as much as it means to you or whatever, which is effectively nothing.
Yeah, okay, so I think we earlier I said that you need to take the good parts of our pagan society and the good parts of Judeo-Christian philosophy and you need to blend them together. I do not agree at all that we live in a Judeo-Christian society. But I think that the caveat
Well, really quick
that
on that,
sacrifices
like when I say that we live in like a Judeo-Christian nation, I'm saying that just because it was never like formalized into the government or whatever, it doesn't mean that like this country's conception of our values and moral systems and like basically embedded in the like fabric of law is a morality that was predominantly informed by Judeo-Christian values for the most part.
I mean, as long as you like heavily water it down with like enlightenment levels of tolerance and all that kind of shit, and if you blow up certain parts of Christian philosophy, like render unto Caesar what is Caesar and render unto gods what is gods, like like if you add like another like 3 or 4 caveats, I guess I could understand your perspective even if I don't agree with it in spirit. But that's also
just because the vast majority of like politicians have been Christian in this country, and like I'm assuming that bleeds into their ideology and like how they do law.
But you know what? I'm a communist, or excuse me, I'm a Christian the way that when communists say like, oh, that person's not communist because they don't believe in a moneyless, stateless, classless society, or that person's not a socialist because they don't believe in decommodification. Right? Yeah. Well, no true Scotsman. But I also think that there are like fundamental tenets of Christianity that you have to subscribe to, or else claiming that you're a Christian is kind of like a very meaningless gesture. So I think that like literally believing in the Trinity, Erudite and I have talked about this, but I think that at least as far as I can tell for like Catholic and Protestant churches that I've been to, the Trinity has been like belief in the Trinity is a fundamental part of like being a Christian.
Yeah.
And I would say,
unless you're Eastern Orthodox, like they do a weird thing. It's basically the Trinity. They're just LARPing about it.
Right. And then what I would say another fundamental part about like Christianity is basically like understanding and trying to live the New Testament. So if you're somebody who's trying to live like the Old Testament and you're like, eye for an eye, I love polygamy, I love killing people, I love doing this, I love doing that, because I believe in God, everything I do is correct. If you take that, but you call yourself a Christian, I don't think you're worshiping the New Testament Jesus. I don't think you're worshiping the God of Jesus. I think you're using the aesthetic of Christianity to gain some kind of social status, but I don't consider you a Christian at all.
I completely agree with you, but I think you're missing the forest for the trees, because my only, like, you're right that, like, as far as, like, I was raised Catholic or whatever, like, you have to adhere to certain tenets for the, like, Vatican to, like, recognize you as, like, a Catholic, basically. Otherwise, they call you, like, a cafeteria Catholic or a Catholic in name only, effectively, because you need to believe in things like Jesus Christ is our only Lord and Savior, transubstantiation.
The Apostolic Creed. You need to believe in the Apostolic Creed.
You can't call yourself without a Christian or like a Catholic meaningfully without being those things. But when we zoom out, and I think the Vatican also recognizes that you have to simultaneously like gatekeep, but not gatekeep so fucking hard that we're going to disqualify the vast majority of people who identify themselves as Catholics or Christians or Muslims or Jews as those things simply because they're not adhering to XYZ tenets. Because I think most people see it as, if you accept Jesus as your like savior and you're going to church and you're making the effort, and even though you're a sinner and you're failing or whatever, that you are functionally a Christian in society. So when we zoom out and we look at society, the vast majority of positions of power in this country historically and even in present day have been occupied by people who are of the Christian faith. Whether or not they perfectly adhere to it or they adhere to some like bastardized version, I agree with you. I do think people use it as like this bludgeoning tool or whatever and just use it to like,
I think they're Easter Christians. I think they're Christmas and Easter Christians in the modern day. Now, if you wanted to go back to like 1950s and before, then yeah, I think you were expected to be at church every fucking week, even if you were the most satanic, evil piece of shit in like the rest of your time on earth. So yeah, I agree. There was a social pressure to be performatively Christian probably up through the 50s and 60s. And then after that, we kind of have this like degradation of social expectation when it comes to religiosity.
I mean, I still think it's there because like Obama couldn't have been elected if he hadn't been like a practicing Christian, in my opinion. And Biden is arguably one of the most religious presidents we've had since like George Bush.
Is the argument whether or not America's a Christian nation right now? Because I have no interest in this.
Okay.
No, sorry. I'm
let's
just
move it
saying
back to
that
the
like
relationships.
it's informed by Christianity, whether it's like it's like actually in the law.
One second, I just want to make this clear. You are welcome to leave at any point.
Yeah, I know. I just want to know if we're talking about marriage anymore, or if we're just
other creators are welcome to join. And I would just like to tell everyone that my next shows are going to be on Tuesday. We have Avi and Tomfoolery talking about identity and trans-inclusive language. And then at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, we have Destiny, Pisco, Adam and Sitch to talk about the Trump indictment and conservative
Pissed
voters.
go.
Now go ahead, Kyla.
Nice. I
Sorry.
want to jump
I
on
was
the
just
after show for
I
that.
was just going to
Sorry.
outline for Protestantism, it's super individual. There isn't like a creed that you have to adopt, but like people will argue whether you're Christian or not. For Catholics, I believe what it is like more or less you need to be in sanctifying grace, which means you probably need to believe in like the apostolic creed, and you must be baptized, otherwise you go to hell. Is like I think how Catholicism works. Just and I think you're talking about is the apostolic creed, which is like the big thing that Catholics believe in.
So
and
how are
most
we
Protestants.
connecting this back to the marriage topic?
Yes, we can.
I'm just giving the Christian, info dump, okay?
All of this
Yes.
happened because I cut Connor off to like give the fucking nuance of why I think like America is founded on like those values. But continue, Connor, and we can move back to the marriage.
Yeah, so if we want to move back to relationships real quick. So I think that the attempt at sacrifice, like I am infinitely more comfortable with looking at a culture of death cultists who have been told like stick it out over and over and over again and telling them like, hey, you are needlessly suffering and you are sacrificing in vain your family's happiness because you have a outdated mode of the emotional conception of what it is to be a man, and you do not just have to work hard and pay your bills. You have to work, unfortunately, you have to work hard, pay your bills, love your wife, and love your children actively, and they have to know that, or you will have a miserable life, you will make other people around you miserable, and you will lose everything you hold dear. I am okay with saying that. What I am not okay with saying is that, hey, the death cult is morally equivalent to whatever the fuck liberal degenerates come up with. Because frankly, I see liberal degenerates basically reinventing the wheel when it comes to moral conduct. And like, just as an example, and then I'll shut the fuck up, it's like they wrote a article about how a whole bunch of polyamorous and open relationship couples were now moving back to monogamy because they found polyamory and polygamy, all their relationships too challenging. And it's like, no shit. It's infinitely easier to be loyal to a single partner and not deal with the sexual jealousies of letting everybody bang your wife and your husband, and to raise children within a two-parent household. It's infinitely easier to do that than it is to let your wife get fucking railroaded before you go kiss her on the fucking mouth, before you go kiss your kids goodnight. And we're acting like fucking liberals and progressives are figuring out something new. They're not. They're figuring out shit that we've known for 3,000 years.
I don't know. I don't know if
Do
I
you
could,
think
like,
a
buy in.
marriage requires 100% fidelity, Connor?
I think a good marriage does.
What
So
do
you
you
don't
think,
think there
Vito?
could be any sort of No, I think you could have an arrangement where, hey, I'm gonna go do this thing or whatever else, as long as there's no strings attached. I don't consider sex.
believe in that. Yeah, I don't
think
believe in
that is
that.
fidelity.
I think there's all like, yeah, you're right, because you're basically negotiating the contract before you engage in like
Right.
extramarital
Okay,
sex.
yeah, sure.
So
I guess I'm asking if there can be extramarital sex.
So I think it's possible. There's like Muslim polygamist people. There's Utah fucking polygamist people. There's some polyamorous people in my comments who insist that they're still happy. But for me, I think you're needlessly complicating your life, and you are going to pay consequences.
Yeah. What if I go to
mean-
Amsterdam and I want to sleep with a beautiful sex worker, and I tell my wife? You just think it's too complicated?
Yo, okay, what I think
Well, that's not you're
I
just
feel like you
informing her that you're
what I
doing
think-
it. If you reach a negotiation, then maybe it could work.
well, and what I'm going to
I'll
say,
send her a text at least 30 minutes ahead of time.
Babe,
Yeah,
I
okay,
love you.
go
I'll be
ahead.
right back.
yeah. So this is
That's some
thi-
Mia Khalifa quality advice right there.
There you go.
Yeah, so this is what I expect. I expect you and her to go to Amsterdam, you to go to the pot shops, have fun, do drugs, hang out, travel around, do the European shit, and then you're gonna be like, babe, I was actually pretty serious about going and banging a sex worker. It's on my bucket list. I want to go do it. Then I expect her to either say, fuck no, go fuck yourself, I will divorce you, or I expect her to say, maybe, like, I'm kind of stoned, maybe you could go have fun or whatever, and as long as you wash your dick and wear a condom, it's okay. And then she allows you to do it. You go do it. You have fun, but you feel a little bit guilty in the back of your head because you kind of feel like you're cheating on your wife, even though you gave her permission. And then I expect you guys to at least fight about it for probably 2 weeks. And then I expect her to at least bring up the idea of banging someone else with your permission in order to make it equitable. And then I expect you to have a whole bunch of misgivings about that. And I expect that
Only
to
2
be
weeks?
the bare minimum level of consequences that you are going to suffer during your relationship. Whereas another very real possibility is that she's so jealous when you do it that your entire relationship and life implode.
I don't know. Okay, wait. So Connor,
Yeah.
are you principally opposed to it, or are you opposed to it because you don't think it works just based on the anecdotes around you?
Yeah, I think it's like a rule utilitarian kind of thing, right? Like
So if you
there,
saw,
there
if like
could
all of a
be-
sudden in like 30 years we saw this en masse of all of these people structuring the relationship in the way that you're saying, like it's not going to work, dude, and it is working. People are reporting like less divorces in those types of arrangements, like a lot more happiness or whatever. Would you then start shifting it to be like, okay, no, you guys are still wrong. We need to get back to these values, or would you start embracing it?
I wouldn't embrace it. The reason why I wouldn't embrace it is because I still think it's like a rule utility thing. I think that there can be exceptions. Maybe there's people like, oh man, I was about to be so rude. I'm
Say
trying
it.
to think.
Not to
I'm
be.
Say
trying.
it,
No,
Karen.
I'm trying to think of how not to be rude and still say the same thing I'm trying to say.
No, just be
Yeah,
rude.
it's
Fuck
gonna
it.
be rude.
Oh
Yeah,
God,
just go.
okay.
Invent a person. Invent an
I-
individual.
No, I feel like there's a lot of people who engage in these relationships, and I feel like I hear the same thing over and over again, which was they were sexually or emotionally abused as a child, or they come from sexually or emotionally abusive relationships, and that as a result they don't attach the same level of sexual and emotional attachment to physical relationships. And this correlation, you're right,
You have to be
it's not
super cautious
causative.
though. Well, no, the issue specifically when we look at like the sequelae of sexual abuse in people is that it tends to have two different effects. One is that it will actually create kind of that like devaluing kind of self-harming pattern of like having lots and lots of sex to kind of like fill this void and stuff like that. But the other half is that it will actually make some people really, really prudish and like fearful of touch, right? As somebody who had CSA, I went down the prudish route. So like we also see, for example, in Christian women who have high levels of vaginismus and never orgasm, like really high rates of childhood like SA as well. And so like I think it's easy to like look at the hedonists and be like, yeah, they've like probably just got trauma. But we don't think about like how like trauma and all these things can also like make us hyper prude. And when you're conservative, you're not noticing it because you think like the hyper prude is probably better than the hedonist. When it's like both are messy. Like me being a hyper prude was super, super damaging for my relationship. It was extremely difficult. It's not something I would highly recommend to anybody. And it shouldn't, like God, for the love of God, there's nothing I hate more in the red pill than when people try to like nobilize my type of experience. It's like the ideal like femme experience, right? And so like the issue is like with trauma, we get hyper rigidity or like hyper fluidity, and like both of these things can be really unhealthy at like extremes.
Sure.
Like coping mechanisms?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I
Survival
don't know what you mean by
mechanisms?
that, but sure.
Well, like I'm saying, because you're saying that like these values that you have are like semi-informed by like some of your trauma or whatever that you survived. So like, are you saying that they should not be over-idealized because they're coping mechanisms, or that it can be that?
I'm saying that we shouldn't be inclined to idealize behaviors that could also come from trauma just because it appeals to our narrative bias. So if you're conservative, you're going to like people's like coping mechanisms, if you want to use that word, that are going to lead them to be more hyper cautious, more hyper vigilant, more like in general slow to make decisions. And we'll nobilize that when it's like that to an extreme is really harmful. Just like on the other side, some trauma will make people like really fluid and floose and impulsive and like do like lots of stuff. And I think on the left, we tend to like sometimes like nobilize that or like at least like normalize it more. And I think we just have to be careful to not normalize.
I'm saying coping mechanism because it's a behavior that you've adapted as a response
that's
to
fine.
trauma, not because you're doing it on some like I'm staking this out on like principally grounded like Christianity. That's all I mean. It is all right though.
Okay,
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what you meant by that word. I don't know what words we use.
There's an amount that I want to cop to this or whatever, where it's like, obviously, like, I wish we could take childhood SA people and basically beat them with a baseball bat behind a wooden shed, the abusers specifically. But I
not the victims, hopefully, yeah.
not the victims, unless they're into it and they consent. The point is like the prudish behavior though, or whatever, I can justify that. Maybe it's like my Evo Psych conservative brain or whatever, but I can almost justify that where it's like you limit your partners because you don't want to have like children that your partner is not going to want to help you take care of. You have limited partners because you don't want to get diseases from promiscuous people. You limit your partners because you want to make sure that the person that you do open up to sexually is somebody who's worthy of your trust and respect and fidelity and love and loyalty. So of course, like I don't like wish the prudish discernment to be rooted in trauma to the point that it's absolutely ruining your fucking life. Of course not. But at the same time, like if I had to choose between prudish discernment and wild promiscuity, then you're right that my conservative bias is going to say I would prefer people to be prudish.
Do you just think like it's impossible to have these like these promiscuous, liberal, degenerate values or whatever that aren't born out of trauma? You think like no, basically sane person is
No,
like
I think you
opting to
could.
do this absent that.
No, I think there actually are a few pornographic actresses who have come out and said, like, I don't have a history of abuse. I'm just really fucking slutty and promiscuous, and I really enjoy it, and I've had a pretty good time in the industry and all that kind of stuff. But you know what's also even more unicorn about that person saying that thing? At least from like the 2 interviews that I saw in which women like articulated that that was their history, they also had good boundaries. They also had the ability to articulate their relationships and what they wanted and what they didn't want, and they had the ability and discernment to like decide who they wanted to work with and why. So they weren't like the victims of their trauma. They were actually like making pretty educated decisions about the kind of stuff that they wanted to participate in. So if you wanted to say, hey, Connor, is this person capable of existing and not following your rule set? I think so. But I think you're talking about a subcategory of people where disproportionately people are going to be basically reacting to abuse.
I just think it's a red herring because I think sexual assaults and like sexual trauma or whatever is like so pervasive, like in society, period, disproportionately affecting women, that you could make the argument that like so much of the reason that marriage has failed or like women have the dispositions that they do is a result of that, and all of like the values that you're promoting and you're espousing or whatever are like this like it's like principled values like it's trauma masquerading as like something positive or whatever, but when we're really just speaking to is like the biases of society, because I feel like you're unwilling to accept like that there is an instance like you're saying it's just like astronomical, the idea that you could be a survivor of that sort of like sexual trauma or whatever and then go on to like freely choose that and be like, no, these two things are like almost unrelated, or like it's not bad. Because I feel like in both instances you're saying it's born of trauma, you just prefer this value set over the other, and that people who are opting to do it the other way are opting for a life of misery, and the other people are at least opting for stability.
Yeah,
I think
Sorry.
you're missing part of what I'm saying, because I think there was 2 pieces there. The first part is basically like trauma can make you prudely, but I think a part that's being missed here that I'm trying to caution against is, and as a result of that, being a prude can do harm to you as well. The idea that like you prefer one or the other, I appreciate they're being like, yeah, it's probably just my conservative stuff. But I would say for the most part, the way that we engage in these things is we always are going to treat the prude like a more like noble, like individual, more moral, which I think is a really, really, really poor understanding. When I look at somebody who's having high levels of sex as a result of trauma or is hyper prudely, I go, wow, yikes, both of them have a lot of baggage. They should both go to therapy. Both of them are probably set up to not be super great partners, and probably both of them need to do a lot of work. I'm saying this as somebody who's super prudely, like there's so many issues that come from this as well, that it's like, I can't underscore to you enough how damaging it can be to like nobilize like the prude type response in and of itself. I understand what you're saying about like the one response, which is like we shouldn't be normalizing it and being like, it's just fine, like go get your rocks off, queen, when it's like it's actually trauma, go to therapy, right? I agree with you on that, right? I want everyone to go to therapy and have a base time fixing themselves. What I'm saying though is that the prude needs therapy too, and instead they get nobilized in a lot of these circles.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's 2 sides of the same coin.
Okay, but
Pretty much.
I agree with 80% of what you said, and I want to add in the 20% caveat. So the 20% caveat is, I feel like if you're acting from a conservative position or a prudish position where you're not engaging in sex and you need to go to therapy in order to open yourself up, in order to have like normal sex or even exciting sex or sex that you're comfortable with, or be able to communicate with your partner what you need and when you need it and all that kind of stuff, I see that as a safer position than somebody who is engaging in promiscuity and then backtracking to the other position. So for me, it would be like, oh, well, when I was fucking 5 years old, a firework went off by my head, and as a result, I'm scared of fireworks. Well, the person who is avoiding fireworks isn't going to blow their fucking hand off, but the person who's shooting bottle rockets out of their fucking asshole is absolutely standing a higher risk of injuring themselves seriously. Yes. So what
impulsive responses in general lead to more like dangerous situations. The issue is that like I understand the leftist plight. I agree, and I understand why everyone is. The issue is that what happens that I'm saying is that like the impulsive type gets like villainized, And the prudish type response gets nobilized when both of them are just like unhealthy responses to situations.
I think it gets nobilized until people are in that relationship and they find it difficult to engage in intimacy, and then whatever the nobility of that like virtue or whatever instantly disappears, and then it becomes about communicating about intimacy and actually trying to figure out a way to be emotionally and sexually open to each other in a way that works for both parties. So I understand the exterior culture makes it noble, but I think the interior culture might not. Like an interior relationship.
Sure. I mean, maybe this is just like an aside. It's just like when we're talking about like women who are like super like self-reserved and like holding themselves, I know so many women in the church that have like stayed a virgin and like were all these things, and they have like the rate of vaginismus among religious people, like religion itself is creating its own sexual trauma, right? And so like this thing that you're talking about is so childhood SA does this, but also just being in a religious institute also creates this type of trauma, which is why rates of vaginismus in religious women, vaginismus is when like your vagina muscles get really, really tight and won't relax for sex. And so it makes sex usually in extreme cases not possible. They have to do like dilation techniques and like rehab. And in like lesser cases, it just makes it really, really painful. They can't really enjoy sex. And
Is
so
everyone okay if I drag in new creators? There will be creators, not random chatters.
I
Yeah,
might have to dip soon
Okay.
though.
No problem.
And so-
Go ahead, Carla, sorry.
what's really interesting that I can't seem to get through the red pill's head is the rates of vaginismus in particularly religious women. I can't remember the stat, but it's like 2 or 3 times higher. It's actually crazy. And orgasm rates are way, way lower. So in that way, we're actually talking this like the stolen valor that you're stealing from me of the ideal relationship has massive amounts of like trauma and problems associated with it in religion, particularly in the way that it's affecting men and women in like the most intimate part.
Yeah, like there's some guys who don't jerk off long enough and then their balls explode.
True. What's the name of this
So
phenomenon, Vito?
It's incelatitis.
A serious disease that affects many every year.
It affects men who are not being sexually promiscuous. Their balls get so swollen with ejaculate that
Sometimes they even turn blue.
and they can die from the bleeding. So ultimately, we're saying that you want to have a situation where the promiscuous, as well as those who abstain from sex, it's viewed and because of psychological trauma, they're both seen as disordered. Is that correct, Erudite?
I would say what I want people to do is like stop putting presumptions and prescriptions on people about like what makes relationships and sex work. Because it seems to be the case that we're in a landscape that isn't like it was ever historically.
Yeah.
And also, our track record isn't super great for these things historically anyways. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, maybe stop moralizing. Maybe pull a little bit of the Chesterton's fence and back up and go, well, what actually works? How do we actually facilitate good relationship?
The big problem is that different things work for different people. Like it's very hard to find any sort of
no, you're right. That is a
upon
really big
solution.
issue. Yeah, is that you can give
so-
generalities, but like that doesn't really help like the like Sikh couple that has like very, very fundamentalist like approaches to like life and marriage.
Right.
I mean, like there are going to be some like differences on the edges or whatever, but for the most part, I think every successful relationship is going to demand some basics, like good communication, frequent contact, sexual intimacy, like that stuff, and then all the other stuff, like the ambient stuff or whatever, can be negotiated. But for the most part, I think I think it's like a good relationship is mutually exclusive with some of the things I already mentioned.
I think that's a good topic. Like, there's many different types of relationships and marriages, but what are the fundamental building blocks that can be applied to the majority of them? And I would agree that feeling this intimacy with your partner, feeling a connection is pretty much the core thing that most people are looking for. Is there anything beyond that?
Okay, but if it fades, can they get divorced?
Yeah, if it's really irreconcilable, but I think even with your best friends, okay, you go through periods of time where you go, I want to hang out with this guy every single day of my life, and then you go, you know what, I'm kind of tired of him, I need a break. I'm sick of that motherfucker, he pissed me off, and then you come back. I have buddies who exited my life, and then years later they're my best friend. I call them up all the time, and I think we don't look at our romantic relationships the same way, where sometimes you do need a break. Sometimes the magic has gone away. It's not going to be firing on all cylinders at all times.
And
I think some people,
when it's not,
yeah, go ahead.
You make fun of each other viciously, and it's hilarious. And then you build up.
Erudite, I think you're
the-
muted.
This might be
Okay.
too revelatory, like too personal, but you make fun of each other viciously until you build up the frustration and the tension, and then you
Yeah.
relieve it in that other way.
You take couples boxing classes. You get it out in the ring.
Until
Yeah, but
Three
then
rounds.
you're talking about that's like a precursor. I feel like that's if you can like joke your way through that and like find the humor even in like strife or whatever, then you have a better foundation than the vast majority of people where that conflict doesn't invite. Even though like I think everybody knows like the thing to do here is like de-escalate and communicate or whatever, but if you can't even like get over that hump or whatever to get back to the point where it's like nothing's fucking funny, this person's like all the little quirks that I found cute and attractive about them, I now just find fucking annoying and I want them to get away from me.
Yeah,
like
but
I don't know
okay,
if
but
that's
this
like
is-
coming back.
Yeah, well, this is kind of like a joke, and I know Sick might want to get in, and I might actually have to dip because I should probably go take care of my family. But like that's where you
Or your
kinda-
family now.
yeah, they're going to bed right now. So we're a family now. Fuck. So-
Right now.
God
I'm
damn
your
it.
son.
So, yeah, well, I'll try to raise you right. So
I love you,
no,
Dad.
there's the thanks. I love you too. So the point being that there's like there's shit that you can do. Like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has this entire episode where like Charlie and Frank are trying to get married, and they're trying to get gay married, and it's actually really difficult. And then they have Maureen Ponderosa and Dennis Reynolds get together like instantaneously, and they're able to go to get the courthouse, and they're able to get their documents instantaneously. And like everything that was cute within 24 hours turns horrible for Dennis within 24 fucking hours. And he's like, I love you too, Maureen. But he's like thinking about fucking murdering her in her sleep and all that kind of shit. So like you just kind of you got to like lean into the memes, lean into the jokes and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't have the ability to have that like camaraderie with your partner, then I'll agree with you. You probably picked wrong. But this is kind of like fundamental parts of relational chemistry that I don't even think you should be dating if you don't have that kind of relational chemistry, let alone married.
Well, I think
Yeah, and you
sometimes
should be
people
with
think
someone
that
for
they
a period
have
of time.
it. One, they
ahead.
confuse like sexual chemistry with like, oh, that means we're definitely going to be on board with everything emotionally, and those like that fades. Those aren't the same thing. And even though I
Yes.
looked it up, and statistically, people who live together actually don't have like a better chance of not getting divorced than people who didn't live together before they got married. Religion is probably the common denominator there, which is like you're less likely to live together before you get married. You're also less likely to get divorced, period. But like you can have all of those things, the picture but like until if you're dating somebody, you can think you have it all, and until you live with them or whatever, like you're just playing house, because once you live together you're like, oh fuck, we're like not compatible. Like I can't be in this person's face.
I'm going to up the ante one more time and then I'm going to leave. I would say that even moving in together is playing house until you have fucking kids. And the reason why is because all of the logistics that you think are a pain in the ass, like doing laundry, cleaning up the house, making sure the dishes are done, the sink's clean, the fucking the kitchen counters are clean, all that kind of shit, all that gets taken to fucking 11. You're not just talking about doing dishes, you're talking about doing fucking bottles and diapers and taking out the trash and mowing the yard and all that kind of shit. And so having somebody that you work with well logistically as a partner gets taken to fucking 11. So what I would say is that you said something incredibly important, Straight Array, that sexual chemistry does not mean emotional chemistry, and emotional chemistry does not mean communicative competence. And we don't even have like the verbiage, let alone the intelligence, to tell young people to look out for these things and the difference between the two. Because I think for a long time in my young life, I mistook sexual chemistry for like love, which is not the same thing at all. Just because you have physical chemistry with another human being does not mean that you guys actually
For
have
some men,
agree.
it takes like
Yeah.
a year or two for the post-nut clarity to kick in. It can
I want to
happen.
say that I agree with you so strongly that I think we should teach 10-year-olds about all the different types of sex so that they can begin to take that knowledge and prepare for these relationships. Connor, you agree?
No, I don't, son. You are so fucking dead wrong. What the fuck is
I
going
think
on?
I think that is so fundamentally important that all these people are freaking out about sex ed and these books and genderqueer or whatever. No, the kids have access to the internet. Give them access to what sex is, what your sexual fetishes are, all this nonsense, because they don't
No.
have that information and they're jumping into these fucked up relationships without that information.
Okay, so
You
Vito's
gotta
main
tell
point
the
aside-
kids.
Vito's
Emotional-
main point
Gotta tell
aside
the
is
kids.
actually, even though I don't think you're doing it based on like evidence that you saw or whatever, but it is been proven that comprehensive sex ed earlier, like from kindergarten K through 12 or whatever, actually does reduce the instances of like childhood sexual assault, because kids
Yes.
understand
And
the
me and
difference
Connor
with like
know this.
consent, yes and no or whatever. I think it just makes people viscerally uncomfortable to think that you're gonna have to talk to like a kid about like anal sex. But it is
You
better.
have to do it.
In
You
middle
have to.
school,
Okay.
middle school, I am perfectly fine describing everything that we talked about. Physical chemistry is not the same as communicational competence. Communicational competence is incredibly foundational to a relationship. Emotional competence and emotional chemistry is incredibly foundational to a relationship. If you guys have completely different plans about what life looks like, you don't want kids, you want to go to college, cross country, you want to do this, you want to do that, then you probably shouldn't
Ease
plan
into
your
anal.
whole ease into anal, use lubrication, all that kind of stuff. Like, if you don't have these conversations, then you're setting up kids for failure. I completely agree with this. But if we're just going to have, like, you know, drag queen story hour at middle school where fucking people are showing, like, how to fucking deep throat a condom onto a fucking wooden penis, hard pass. But I appreciate you guys.
I
I
think
hope you have a
there's
beautiful night.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Hello. Good evening. There are 65 of y'all in the chat right now, okay? And I have been spamming my donation link tonight. And to be fair, a couple of people have done super chats, okay? So I thank you for the super chats. I thank you for the donations. I'm assuming it's Froggy Style because Froggy Style is the king of fucking gifted memberships. Also, I appreciate the super chat from somebody earlier. I think it was around like 10 or 20 bucks. So I do appreciate the donations that have come through. Thank you kindly. However, Cloud for the Cloud God. Thank you, Cloud Casino. Sincerely appreciated. And I think that's it. That's the only one that I can see on my screen. So, Descry Gaming says, I just joined Interesting Topics. Go ahead and rewind it. Check it all out. But I am tapped out. I have $0. Groceries are purchased. Bills are almost paid. But I have no money until Thursday. And we're just surviving. And I want to give my kids a sweet treat. And I want a sweet treat as well. I want chocolate ice cream. So I know that that is a stupid purchase. But my wife was being responsible and did not buy any sweets for us. So basically, we're on just dinner, just breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next few days. So if you have dollary dues, here's my PayPal link. Please send me some cash, and I am going to go buy my kids a pint of ice cream. If you don't, I will view it as the personal moral failing of all 65 of you in chat. But I won't hold you accountable because there's so many of you. So I can't hold you accountable. And there are a whole bunch of names that I recognize and I love, like Christian Valeris, Danger Close, Brandon Myers. Descry Gaming says that he's new, so we won't pretend that he's an old, an old head. Jonah Boy. I'm trying to see other people that I kind of recognize. Eugene Peterson, I recognize that name. So I recognize you guys. If you have any cash in your pocket, please give it to me. If you're broke or tapped out like me, don't worry about it. I appreciate you and love you parasocially all the same. I hope you have a beautiful night. I am going to... oh, Jesus, this is a lot of pressure. Well, QC John, yes, I love you as well. Sport Brand, oh, Jesus, this is a lot of pressure. If you're broke, don't give me money. That's it. I can't... Yeah, I'm sure you don't recognize me. Taze cannot give me money because I've already taken enough money from him. So, yes. But parasocial love to you and yours. Here's my PayPal account. I hope y'all have a beautiful night. Goodbye for now.